Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Wednesday, February 12th, and for today's headlines we have: the Pope rebukes Trump over migrant deportations and refutes VP Vance's theology. Burglary of Joe Burrow's home is linked to a pattern of crime tourism, FBI says. Musk's team announced millions in cuts to educational department amid legal pushback. Behind the scenes of the Westminster Dog Show, and push to drop Adams charges reveals a Justice Department under Trump's sway. The Pope rebukes Trump over migrant deportations and refutes VP Vance's theology. Pope Francis criticized the Trump administration's stance on migrants, calling the president's pledge of mass deportations a major crisis. In a strongly worded letter to the U.S. Catholic bishops, Francis wrote that it's important for Catholics to disagree with any measures that identifies the legal status of some migrants with criminality. Francis also said that deporting people, who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, exploitation, and persecution, damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particularly vulnerability and defenselessness. The letter also appears to reply to remarks by Vice President Vance, in which he said people should care for their families, communities, and country before caring for others. Francis instead wrote that people should meditate on love that builds a fraternity open to all without exception. Christian love is not a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups, the Pope writes. Here's the official letter from the Pope. The Pope is the second high-ranking Catholic leader to criticize Vance, who is Catholic, after Vance accused the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops of resettling immigrants to receive federal funding. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan called the vice president's remarks scurrilous and nasty. You want to come look at our audits, which are scrupulously done? You think we make money caring for the immigrants? We're losing it hand over fist. We're not in a money-making business, Dolan said. Burglary of Joe Burrow's home is linked to a pattern of crime tourism, FBI says. The recent burglary of Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow's mansion is a part of a wave of crime tourism, in which international burglary teams travel across the U.S. to steal from homes in affluent areas, according to the Justice Department. The burglars often use sophisticated strategies to overcome security measures so they can pilfer jewelry, watches, and luxury goods from mansions. The FBI calls them South American theft groups. Many of the suspects arrested so far, including in Burrow's case, are from Chile. The pattern of tactics used by the teams fits the Ohio burglary of Burrow's home in early December and other crimes, including recent burglaries targeting professional athletes, FBI spokesman Todd Lingergan told NPR. In recent months, burglars target the homes of high-profile players such as the NFL's Travis Kelce and NBA's Luka Doncic. Last week, a federal court unsealed a January indictment charging two men with operating a large jewelry fencing operation in New York City. The indictment alleged the defendants were fences for South American burglary crews who rove to the U.S., targeting wealthy neighborhoods and provided an essential market for the stolen goods between 2020 and 2025. One of the men had been in contact with suspects in the burglary of a high-profile athlete in Ohio last December. A press release from the U.S. Attorney Office for the Eastern District of New York stated, Cincinnati case echoes a wider pattern. An FBI special agent who investigated the Burrow burglary said it was consistent with burglaries executed by South American theft groups, SATG, according to an affidavit. Law enforcement agencies across the country, FBI Special Agent Aaron Barter wrote, had burglaries that fit the SATG MO, wherein professional athletes were the victims. The SATG MO for residential burglaries include targeting high-end houses that back up to green spaces, walking trails, golf courses, or other undeveloped land, Barter wrote. They then get access to the resident through a rear window or glass door on the second floor when possible. The thieves focus on jewelry and designer accessories, which are typically sold through illegal fences across the coast in states such as New York, California, and Florida, he said. The groups usually consist of foreign nationals from South America who either enter the country illegally or overstay on visas to continue committing their crimes, Barter wrote. SATGs often travel using rental vehicles and will carry false identifications and documents, he said. adding that the groups routinely activate and deactivate cell phones, sometimes in less than a month. In the Burrow case, the suspects allegedly carried bogus ID cards purposely from Argentina and other countries and bearing false names according to the affidavit. The burglaries are part of a wave of crime tourism. The FBI has a nationwide working group devoted to South American theft groups. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation formed a task force to address them last March. The FBI has issued tips for minimizing the chances of being victimized by the crime gangs, including avoiding saying on social media that you're on vacation. The agency has also specifically warned pro sport leagues that athletes could be targeted, according to the ABC News, which first reported the development. Much of the focus of the theft rings is in Chile, due to its part to its 2014 inclusion of the U.S. visa waiver program that lets foreign citizens visit the U.S. for up to 90 days without a visa. Chile remains the only South American country on the U.S. visa waiver list. In 2023, members of Congress from California wrote to Chile's ambassador to the U.S., saying they had strong concerns that the Chilean government wasn't doing enough to prevent criminals from traveling to the U.S. In just 1 year, they said, 14 Chilean nationals had been charged with burglaries and other related crimes in Orange County after entering the United States under the visa waiver program. Similar concerns have been raised in Michigan, where state lawmakers said that in 2023, multiple Chilean nationals who had entered the country under the visa waiver program were arrested for stealing millions of dollars worth of goods in Michigan's Oakland County area. In July of 2023, Chile and the U.S. signed an agreement aimed at sharing more information to combat serious crime. One of several steps required for Chile to maintain its status in the visa waiver program, according to Chile's Foreign Affairs Ministry. Nearly 350,000 Chileans use the program each year, the ministry said. Despite the focus on Chile, South American theft groups cases have also been found to have ties in numerous other countries such as Colombia, and the FBI Sacramento, California field office says a group with members from Chile, Peru, and Venezuela has been linked to sophisticated robberies targeted at least 29 ATM robberies across at least 8 states. A long trail led to the Burrow suspects, investigators say. 3 Chilean men are now facing federal charges related to the burglary at Burrow's house, where thieves took nearly $300,000 worth of jewelry, designer luggage, and other items on the evening of December 9, 2024, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in southern Ohio. At the time, Burrow was in Texas for a game against the Dallas Cowboys. Jordan Francisco Quirnagua Sanchez, 22, Bastian Alejandro Orellana Morales, 23, and Sergio Andres Ortega Cabello, 38, faced charges including transporting stolen goods across state lines and falsifying records in a federal investigation, along with state charges. Ohio State Highway Patrol initially arrested the 3 after a traffic stop in January, along with other man in the vehicle, Alexander Esteban Hanquil Chavez, who faced state charges. An officer-worn camera recorded the traffic stop, showing one of the 2 men wearing a Bengals knit cap. Items in the back of the trunk included a t-shirt from LSU, where Burrow started in college. Tools that can punch a hole in a window were tucked behind the glove compartment. The defender's office in Clark County, Ohio, which is representing the man, declined to comment on the case when reached by NPR. A Fence pawn shop was raided in Manhattan. On Tuesday, federal prosecutors in New York City announced the arrest of 2 men operating a Manhattan pawn shop who are alleged in court documents to have regularly served as fences for South American theft groups who engage in crime tourism. One of the men, Dmitry Naziski, was linked to at least 2 of the men arrested in Ohio by phone records and video surveillance, according to the court filing by the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. The document alleges that Naziski had contact with one of the Ohio suspects less than a week before Burrow's house was broken into. Naziski and another suspect, Juan Villar, each face 1 federal count of conspiracy to receive stolen property and 3 counts of receipt of stolen property. They're accused of fencing countless pieces of stolen merchandise taken from across the U.S. and having ties to at least 5 separate burglary crews that have been operating since 2020. Those crews were composed largely of foreign nationals, prosecutors said. A message to an attorney representing Nazinski was not returned before the story was published. Authorities' searches of Nazinski's storage unit found large quantities of luxury goods and clothing, including high-end handbags, wine, sports memorabilia, jewelry, and art, according to court documents. Prosecutors say the units also held power tools commonly used in burglaries and opening safes. They also allege that witnesses said Nazinski and Villar coached them to steal items away from New York, so it'll be easier for the defendants to resell the items and harder for law enforcement to track. The documents say Nazinski, a Georgian national, has been subjected to a final order of removal from the U.S. since 2003. However, Nazinski remains in the United States as he cannot be returned to his home country. Musk's team announces millions in cuts to education department amid legal pushback. Elon Musk's cost-cutting team said it had terminated 89 of the department's contracts, apparently targeting its research arm. Elon Musk's cost-cutting effort announced a variety of cuts at the educational department totaling over $900 million, apparently aimed at hobbling the department's research arm, the Institute of Education Sciences. The team Mr. Musk had assembled, which was operated in relative secrecy and shuttering other agencies such as USAID and slashing government programs, said on Monday that the Education Department had terminated 89 contracts as well as 29 grants associated with diversity and equity training. Most, if not all, of the contracts hit the Institute of Education Sciences portfolio, including education innovation and research grants, and review projects associated with the What Works Clearinghouse, which produces and curates research on best practices in education, according to 3 people familiar with the department's contracting. The people requested anonymity out of fear of reprisal because they were not authorized to discuss the cuts. Less than 2 weeks after the release of the new federal testing data showing reading achievements at historic lows, the cuts were likely to hit research intended to answer questions about some of the biggest problems in American education since the COVID-19 pandemic, such as absenteeism and student behavioral challenges. A spokesman for the Education Department did not elaborate on the programs or grants it gave the order to suspend, referring reporters to a social media post from the account associated with Mr. Musk's efforts. But the move created immediate alarm among researchers and lawmakers who see the information assembled by the department as an invaluable resource for educators working to improve teaching methods. Cuts to the agency's research grants were especially notable given that the federal government has taken a leadership role in collecting data on education and highlighting best practices since the 1960s, and Chester E. Finn Jr., who served under President Ronald Reagan as the Education's Department Assistant Secretary for Research and Improvement. Mr. Finn compared education research to medical research, pointing out that there is no equivalent to the role pharmaceutical companies play as a private sector funding source. Education research, he said, is arguably the oldest and most central function of the federal government in education. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington, denounced the cuts. An unelected billionaire is now bulldozing the research arm of the Department of Education, taking a wrecking ball to high-quality research and basic data we need to improve our public schools, Mr. Murray said in a statement on Monday. Miss Murray. Cutting off these investments after the contract had already been inked is the definition of wasteful. Separately, on Tuesday, a federal district court judge in Washington gave the government more time to respond to a legal challenge that had sought to restrict members of Mr. Musk's team from gaining access to sensitive data housed at the department. The lawsuit, brought by 2 legal groups representing the University of California Student Association, sought to keep Mr. Musk's associates from combing through the Education Department's data because of privacy concerns related to the personal identifying information that students routinely disclose when applying for federal aid. In the hearing on Tuesday, Judge Randolph D. Moss expressed some doubt about whether lawyers representing the students could show that Mr. Musk's team had harmed students by improperly gaining access to their data because it was unclear whether anyone on Mr. Musk's team was operating as an employee of the department. Here you're dealing with people who, at least apparently, in some form or another, are government employees, although I don't really know that, and I don't have an administrative record, Judge Moss said. Mr. Musk's team, part of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, has been operating in the Education Department for more than a week. Team members were added to the agency's staff directory and have been working from the top floor of its main building in Washington. President Trump's appointees have told staff members at the Education Department that Mr. Musk's team will scrutinize the agency's budget and operations. They warned various offices in the Education Department to expect some upheaval in connection to the review, according to recordings obtained by the New York Times. A lawyer for the Justice Department said on Tuesday that the team litigating the matter had not been briefed on whether members of Mr. Musk's team had actual access to sensitive student information, such as tax return information, social security numbers, or income data. What are they doing in that system? Why would they need to be in that system? Judge Moss said. There's not a lot of clarity about what the Doge employees are doing. Behind the scenes at the Westminster Dog Show. With the event returning to Midtown Manhattan for the first time since 2020, thousands of dogs flooded the city with a single goal in mind: Best in Show. Things are finally back to normal for the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show, or at least as normal as can be expected for an event that features more than 2,500 dogs flooding into Midtown Manhattan to compete for the coveted title of Best in Show. Traditionally, a winter event held at Madison Square Garden, since before the venue even had a name, Westminster was thoroughly disrupted by the pandemic. For 2 years, it moved out of New York City entirely, with the event being held at Lyndhurst, an estate in suburban Tarrytown. And for the last 2 years, it took up residence in the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Queens. It was also moved to warmer months in hopes of limiting the spread of COVID. But for the 149th edition of the event, which began on Saturday with a series of contests testing some dogs' agility and obedience, the show is back to February and back to Midtown. The initial stages of breed and group judging are being held at the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center, and the main event, Best in Show, is slated for Tuesday night at the Garden. Getting ready for the show involves a great deal of work from humans and dogs alike. The coats of dogs at Westminster are luxurious enough to make anyone feel like they should rethink their hair care routine. While blue booties are not the most flattering of accessories, they do help emphasize just how fluffy some of these dogs truly are. Characteristics like fur color, eye color, and gait are intended to follow strict specifications, but a group of Yorkshire Terriers took uniformity to an extreme with matching red bows to keep the fur out of their eyes. A wide variety of dogs necessitates a wide variety of seating solutions. None, a Borzoi, grabbed a nice large platform for a break with her handler and owner, Kelly Davis, while Tova, Shih Tzu, just needed a portion of Judy Hardling's lap. Standing at attention in perfect form is harder than it looks, whether you're a member of the hound group, Connor, or his handler, Chesley Latch. One can only imagine the crimes committed by this smooth-coat Chihuahua. The American Kennel Club describes the Bernese Mountain Dog as a hardy dog who thrives in cold weather, but Pippa, in a sparkling coat, wasn't taking any chances. Strict adherence to breed standards is crucial to a dog's chances, which leads to many instances of seeing double. In this case, Sophie and Pixie are, indeed, two different silky terriers, and not one standing near a mirror. Who said Westminster isn't rough and tumble? Reese, a border collie, had to have his paw taped up before the new flyball competition, which is a relay race for dogs. While the quiet and extremely serious judging of breed and group winners is what most people expect at Westminster, Saturday calendar at the Javits Center was filled with competitions like flyball that tested entrants' physical capabilities. Before the dogs go under the microscope of judging, they are poked and prodded and vacuumed and inspected. Dandy, a Pekingese, had no issues with people getting in his face. The Java Center is a big place, and Augie, a French bulldog, left the walking to the other dogs as he rode around in a stroller pushed by his co-owner, Debbie Cowperthwaite. Loose fur? Not on this guy's watch. They may look like tiny gray ponies from an alien planet, but Chinese cresteds are members of the toy group, and they come in hairless and furry variations. Blake, a border collie, was one of the dogs competing at a 12th annual Masters Agility Championship on Saturday. The event was won by another border collie, Vanish. Some dogs think they are the center of attention. Albert, a Pomeranian, no, he is the dog people have come to see. Dogs competing at Westminster all have extremely formal names, which indicate their pedigree and breeder's name, but they also have nicknames that are often much more fun. Consider Elvis Presley the Cocker Spaniel and Falker the Brussels Griffon. Perhaps jealous of all the terriers being toted around the Java Center, Meadow, a Dalmatian, tried the same with her owner and handler, Jennifer Casabello. Dogs need to run around the ring as they are being judged. When it comes to the smaller ones, a human can walk alongside them with ease. With some of the smaller dogs, it can sometimes be hard to see any actual feet amid all the fluff. When Kite, a Brussels Griffon, is done with his dog show business, he could start entering beard and mustache competitions. One of the most devoted dog fans make their way to the early stages of Westminster, which means dog-related accessories and clothing are extremely common. The dogs at Westminster are all champions, and things can get awfully competitive, but as Luna can remind us, they are also still dogs, extremely good dogs. Push to drop Adams' charges reveals a Justice Department under Trump's sway. Eric Adams cultivated a close relationship with President Trump. Now, U.S. prosecutors in Manhattan have been told to drop the corruption case against the New York City mayor. The Justice Department on Monday ordered federal prosecutors to drop the corruption charges against Mayor Eric Adams of New York, a remarkable incursion into a continuing criminal case that raises questions about the fair administration of justice during President Trump's second term. The order was sent in a letter from the Department Acting No. 2 official Emil Bove III, to Manhattan prosecutors who brought the charges against the mayor last year. Mr. Bove justified the decision to ask for the dismissal by saying that the mayor's indictment had limited Mr. Adams' ability to cooperate in President Trump's immigration crackdown. He also suggested that the indictment, which was handed up in September, threatened to interfere with the June 2025 mayoral primary, despite the 9-month interval between the two events. Mr. Bove explicitly said that the Justice Department had made its decision without assessing the strength of the evidence against Mr. Adams or the legal theories undergirding the case. Instead, his letter criticized the U.S. attorney who brought it and former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. He offered explicitly political arguments for dropping the charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, and soliciting illegal foreign campaign contributions from foreign nationals and bribery, asserting the urgency of Mr. Trump's immigration objectives. It will now fall to the acting head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, Danielle R. Sassoon, whether to heed Mr. Bove's order to dismiss the charges as soon as practicable by filing a motion with the judge. A spokesman for Ms. Sassoon's office declined to comment. The letter was a remarkable intervention in a high-profile public corruption prosecution, one that cast the independence of federal prosecutors into doubt, given the way Mr. Adams had curried favor with Mr. Trump. Mr. Bove directed that the charges against Mr. Adams be dismissed without prejudice, suggesting that the case could be revived if merited or if it pleased the president. As with Mr. Trump's decision to issue clemency to everyone charged in connection with the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, Mr. Bove's letter appeared to represent a new assertion of the administration's prerogatives when it comes to prosecution. What Mr. Trump wants, his Justice Department will seek to accomplish. The Justice Department is making decisions that are not based on facts or the law, said Carrie H. Cohen, a former federal public corruption prosecutor in Manhattan. The memo explicitly says this is not about facts or the law, but it's about other considerations entirely. The news broke about his case Monday evening. Mayor Adams, a Democrat, was dining with John Castemistis, a Republican billionaire with ties to Mr. Trump, at Gallagher's Steakhouse on West 52nd Street. Mr. Adams had no substantive comment, but his lawyer, Alex Spiro, provided a statement. As I've said from the outset, the mayor is innocent, and he would prevail, Mr. Spiro said. Today he has. The Department of Justice has reevaluated this case and determined it should not go forward. He did not note the Justice Department's acknowledgement that it refrained from evaluating the evidence. Mr. Spiro added, now thankfully, the mayor in New York can put this unfortunate and misguided prosecution behind them. The response of Mr. Adams' opponents in the mayor race suggests that New York was unlikely to do so. This should outrage every single New Yorker, said State Senator Zelnor Murray. His fellow senator, Jessica Ramos, said Eric Adams sold out New Yorkers to buy his own freedom, and Zoran Mamindi, an assemblyman, said Eric Adams has narrowed the focus of city government to a singular goal, keeping himself out of prison. Instead of standing up for New Yorkers, Adams is standing up for precisely one person, said Brad Launder, the city's comptroller and another of the mayor's election rivals. New Yorkers deserve better. Adams' critics have accused him of cozying up to Mr. Trump in hopes of obtaining a pardon from him or having his charges dismissed, and they have said he might agree to greater cooperation on deportations as part of a mutually beneficial thaw with the Republican president. The mayor has been adamant that the indictment has not distracted him from his duties. He routinely uses media availabilities and news releases to trumpet drops in some categories of crime and declining population in the city's migrant shelters. I can do my job. My legal team is going to handle the case, the mayor said in December on Bloomberg TV. He added, people said it was going to be a distraction. I'm moving forward, and I'm going to continue to deliver for the people of the city of New York. Mr. Bove's letter argued the opposite. It said that the case had unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigrant and violent crime that escalated under the policies of the prior administration, referring to President Biden. Mr. Bove, who represented President Trump in 3 of his criminal cases, directed that there must be no further targeting of Mayor Adams or additional investigative steps until after the election, when the case would be re-examined, presumably by Mr. Trump's choice to permanently lead the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, Jay Clayton. The office investigation into the mayor began in the middle of 2021, and the conduct described in the indictment reaches back into Mr. Adams' tenure as Brooklyn Borough President. Prosecutors accuse him of accepting more than $100,000 in flight upgrade and airline tickets, pressuring the New York Fire Department to speed up approval of a new Turkish consulate, and receiving foreign contributions from wealthy foreigners who were not legally permitted to give to his campaign. By soliciting those illegal donations, Mr. Adams fraudulently obtained millions of dollars in public matching funds for his campaign, prosecutors say. The mayor pleaded not guilty, but just weeks ago, prosecutors said they had uncovered additional criminal conduct by Mr. Adams. But Mr. Bove did not acknowledge the length of the investigation or the seriousness of the accusations. Instead, he said that the timing of the charges and the more recent public actions of the U.S. attorney who brought the case, Damian Williams, had threatened his integrity, creating appearances of impropriety. Mr. Bove appeared to be referring to a website Mr. Williams created in an article he wrote last month in which he said that the city was being led with a broken ethical compass. Lawyers for Mr. Adams had argued to the judge in the case that Mr. Williams' article, which did not name Mr. Adams, would prejudice the jury pool and was evidence that Mr. Williams had been acting to boost his own career. Mr. Williams had no comment Monday evening on Mr. Bove's letter. Mr. Bove said that the removal of Mr. Adams' security clearance, a result of the indictment, had hindered consultations with Trump administration officials about immigration enforcement in the nation's largest city. He directed the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan to do all it could to restore it. Mr. Trump has the authority to restore the clearance himself. Mr. Adams met with Mr. Trump near his Mar-a-Lago estate last month in an unusual display of political and perhaps personal outreach. Days later, he attended Mr. Trump's inauguration in Washington. Mr. Adams had said that he would not publicly criticize Mr. Trump, even as many other Democrats have assailed the president's agenda and his calls for mass deportations. For his part, Mr. Trump said he would consider pardoning Mr. Adams and characterized the mayor as a victim of politics. The president likewise claimed, without providing evidence, that he himself was politically persecuted by the federal and state prosecutors who brought 4 indictments against him. Mr. Bove's letter does not set a deadline by which prosecutors must file a motion with the court seeking dismissal of the charges against Mr. Adams. If prosecutors in Manhattan do move forward with a motion to drop the case, the judge overseeing it, Dale E. Ho of U.S. District Court in Manhattan, may question the decision. But under legal precedent, he has limited power to refuse the request. Like the criminal case against Mr. Trump himself, the prosecution of Mr. Adams has attracted the type of media attention that befits corruption charges against a mayor in the country's financial and cultural capital. But Mr. Bove cited that coverage as another reason not to go forward, said increasing prejudicial pretrial publicity risks contaminating the jury pool and affecting witnesses. The language was familiar. Mr. Bove and Mr. Trump's other defense lawyers sought to delay the president's 2024 criminal trial by arguing that exceptionally prejudicial pretrial publicity was substantial, ongoing, and likely to increase. That is all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.